Welcome, everyone, to Creative on Purpose Live. This is a show dedicated to helping advancing solopreneurs build businesses on their terms that fund and fit the life that they actually want. My name is Scott Perry. I am the publisher of Transcendent Solopreneurship, which is home of the Purpose Driven Prosperity Model, where we are trying to help solopreneurs build businesses without digital marketing BS so they can spend more of their time doing the work that they love with people they care about and less time doing the things that they don't enjoy doing. And I am thrilled today to have Veronica with me here today. Veronica and I are old friends in digital terms. We met on Substack here probably about 2 years ago when I first got started. I'm a big fan of hers, but I'm going to let Veronica introduce herself. So, Veronica, tell everyone who you are, what are you up to these days, and where can people go to learn more about you and the difference you're making?
Absolutely. And hi, Scott. Hi, everyone. Hong Kong, where I live. I'm Veronica. I'm the founder of the Lemon Tree Mindset, which is a publication on Substack that helps people, I love to say, turn their creativity into their lifestyle. I think that's the best way to define what I'm doing and why I'm here today, which is really to help people turn that little seed of creativity, whether it's publishing books, whether it's public speaking, whether it's trying to build their community and take it to the next level. So that's really what I do. But I used to have a previous life before doing all of these, and I used to be a proper corporate girl working like for big Fortune 500 companies like Apple, like Estee Lauder, and the pandemic really shook things off in my life. I ended up trapped abroad. It's almost like a movie. I went on a holiday during the pandemic with my two daughters who were 3 and 4. We ended up locked abroad in Australia, of all places. My husband is actually from there. And that's where, after not being able to find a job for 6 months, I was very frustrated. I had a lot of excuses and all of that. I decided to write my new story. That's when I decided writing. I was already 41. So it's never too late to get started. And from that little seed came a lot of lemons, a lot of lemon trees. And just a little fun fact on why it's called the lemon tree mindset. And it's because it's really my philosophy that when life gives you lemons, you should use the seeds to plant your lemon tree. So not only to make lemonade, but also to plant your lemon tree. That's also the name of my first book, The Lemon Tree Mindset. So that's a little bit of a general introduction. I'm originally from Spain. I'm a writer, I'm a coach, I'm a public speaker as well. But my most important role, and I do have this on LinkedIn, and it's a great hook actually, is CEM, Chief Executive Mom.
I love that. You've given us a little bit of your origin story, the immediacy of how you came to be doing what you're doing, where you're doing it because of the pandemic and getting locked down in Hong Kong and so forth. I'm interested in just hearing a little bit about more of the backstory. I'm guessing that little 9-year-old Veronica did not sit in her bedroom dreaming of being a public speaker or an author, but I'm guessing that there are some roots to what you're doing now that go all the way back to your young life. I'd love to hear a little bit about, what's the entire journey been like? Uh, what did you go to school for? How did you make the transition? What are the skills that you learned even as a child or as a younger person that you're now applying and informing and inspiring the journey that you're on now?
What a beautiful question, Scott. And if you visit my publication or if you see any of the work that I do, the center piece of everything that I do, the anchor is really community. I talk a lot about that. I the Spanish version, by the way, called El Limonero, and it's all about community. It's all about bringing people together. And I never really realized it, but community has always been a big part of who I am since I was a very little kid. I always wanted to belong. And the reason for this, and we all want to belong, but to make it a little bit more personable and why this is so important to me, is because I always lived in a lot of different countries since I was very little. I'm originally from Spain, from the Canary Islands. I don't know if anyone has been there, beautiful part of the world. And when I was 5, we moved to a new country. We moved to France. And I was too little to understand that I was going to a new country and speak in a different language. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was that I was parachuted into a public school in France. and I didn't speak the language. I didn't understand what the kids were doing, and I just had like this urge of belonging. And so I learned French very quickly. Before I learned French, I actually did a lot of puzzles because that was my only way to connect with those kids. And then from France, we moved to Brazil, and I was 11. Same thing happened again. School was in Portuguese, so I had to learn a new language, and I really had like this sense and this need of building a community. And then that story went on. So I have 9 different stories because I've lived in 9 different countries. From there, I went to the Netherlands. And that's when I learned English, actually. English is not my first or my second language, it's my fourth language. Because by then I had already learned a few others. And so that really became the story of my life, of how important it is to communicate, how important it is not to learn other languages, but to really make people feel included and create this place of belonging. And moving forward as an adult, I love this lifestyle of being a bit of a nomad, an explorer, an adventurer. And when I was in my early 20s, I moved to China. Now, to give you a bit of background, moving to China, so this is going to tell my age, right? In 2003, I moved to learn Chinese and to start my career there. It was huge. I didn't know anyone who had ever been to China, not even on holidays. There was no Google. There's still no Google. There was no internet. There was no phones, nothing, right? So there was all this cultural shock. And that's really what brought me to where I am today in Hong Kong. This has been home, Greater China. I've been living here for 20 years now. So it's really been this journey of trying to create this community and, as I said, the word belonging. And so what happened, and this is how I connect the dots, is when I found myself unemployed in Australia and I was trying to just create a new path, I realized that so many people in life, they have the same need of belonging. They want to be heard. They want to communicate with others. They have a story that they want to share. They have value that they want to add, but somehow we don't find that place. And so, because I was feeling so lonely, I was really without a job, and finding that place was something that I was really urging so much that I ended up creating my own community. So that was really the seed, and I think it's a beautiful way of connecting. Back to your point, what are some of the transferable skills? Communicating, connecting, really being able to create a place for people to bond, exactly what we're doing today. So that's a little bit how I'm closing the loop.
I love that. Well, and I just want to highlight the themes that I heard because I think they're really relevant to the folks that are drawn to the Transcendent Solopreneurship and anybody that's invested in a purpose-driven business where they just want to earn enough money to make sure they can do the same work tomorrow with and for people they care about. That theme of belonging, communicating, connecting, collaborative, creative endeavor, all those things that you're talking about, these are things that I find we all were very skilled and proficient at as young children. Like we do impossible things as kids. Like you come out, you can't walk, you can't talk, you can't read, you can't write, you can't do any of the, and somehow miraculously we just become these things. And then maybe it's institutionalized education or institutionalized occupations, but some of these inherent human skills that are so important, especially now in the age of rising AI, they get sort of beaten out of us, or we forget our connection to these things. And I'm hearing in your story this theme that you've always been kind of invested in this. And maybe do you think it has something to do with the fact that in so many instances in your life, you were kind of the outsider. You were the new kid coming in to a new school, in a new country, in a new language. Do you think that tuned you to that frequency of the importance of community, belonging, communication, and so forth?
Absolutely. And it was honestly the reason why I did this space, because when I found myself in that situation of being unemployed and being unwanted, it really made me understand what rejection means. And it really made me pause and realize that so many people were going through something similar, whether it's because they had been laid off, which was happening, unfortunately, still happening a lot, whether because they were feeling lost in their career. And so I think when you really find yourself in that situation, you are really able to have much more empathy. So, absolutely. The other thing is that I'm personally an introvert, even though I'm a public speaker and I do a lot of live sessions, and people are like, oh, you don't look like an introvert. There are a lot of myths and misconceptions around an introvert. But one of the things and one of the skills that introverts have is that we're very good at listening, and not only listening to the words, but listening to what's not being said, understanding the situation, reading between the lines. So I did find that that combination of very often being an outsider and also being an introvert really helped me create the space that I wanted to create, so that people have a voice. Many people in my community are introverts as well, and they think that is amazing that we're able to speak up. And for once, we have a community where we amplify each other's voices.
I love that. Well, I just want to give a quick shout out to some of the folks that are here. Liam has been lighting up the chat a little bit. Anthony, our mutual friend, is here. Penny and Bree from my community have joined in. So we're thrilled to have you all here. If you have any questions for Veronica or myself during the course of the conversation, feel free to just drop them in the chat. I'm trying my best to keep an eye on my laptop as those come in. One of the things that you and I connected with recently in some notes conversations was this whole idea of purpose. I had repurposed an article I wrote called "The Path to Purpose," where I talked about that a little bit. And as you're speaking about the 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 power and the importance of empathy when it comes to being a community builder and someone that wants to cultivate and facilitate belonging, um, these are things that have to be done with a great deal of intention and integrity if they are going to be sustainable, if they are going to last, if we're going to build vibrant, dynamic communities of belonging. They have to be kind of done with, for, and on purpose, with and for a specific kind of person, because you're building culture, right? The whole idea of people like us do things like this. So I'd love to dive into and just revisit that conversation that we've had recently, because purpose, as someone whose brand is creative on purpose, obviously creativity and purpose are really important to me. But I think that purpose often is a term that we all think we really fully understand, but it can really mean different things to different people. And when we really get pushed, it's, I think, the same with empathy. Like, everybody thinks that they understand empathy until they're asked to define it, and then it gets really hard to explain. So, what? How do you define purpose, and how do you go about looking for or trying to allow purpose to emerge in the things that you're doing?
So let me break it down into layers. First, maybe I can talk about my purpose and what I'm trying to create. And coming from the corporate world, I actually thought that I was successful in the sense that I had a great job, I had a great title at Apple, great package, but I realized that my purpose wasn't really there. It was, in the case of Apple, it was not my vision, it was Steve Jobs' vision, and I was selling the phones. And yes, I had a great time in that company, but it wasn't really something that I was building. And when I started being a solopreneur, when I started writing, I realized that there is so much fulfillment, there is so much enjoyment in doing something that you love doing and getting paid for it. And I don't think we talk enough about the monetization, because there's almost this shame of saying, oh, I charge for my work. But yes, I would rather make a living out of something that fulfills me, out of my creativity, out of something that I'm creating. So I think having that reconciliation is very important. So purpose for me is to do something where I'm not waiting for the weekend to come. And honestly, Scott, I'm so excited when I come in the morning. It's morning time here in Hong Kong. Today I was like, yes, I'm going to have a chat with Scott. Yesterday I did a live session for my community. After this, I'm going for a run, because I'm building a business around my lifestyle. It's not just what I do, it's the life that I build. And that's where my job and my work plays a key role. But purpose is really that, is being able to find something that gives you joy, where you're also adding value to others. In my case, it's writers, creators, solopreneurs who also want to do that. and really wake up excited in the morning. And it sounds so simple, but it's so hard. I know so many people who are quietly burning out in especially corporate world. So that's a little bit about my purpose and this idea of creating or turning your creativity into your lifestyle. That's my purpose. But I talked about layers. And so the second layer is, what is the purpose of my community? And for me, I'm a very visual person. I don't know if there are any other visual learners here, but I always need metaphors to explain concepts. The way that I explain my publication is with a house, for example, where you're the host and you have the guests. The way that I explain purpose in my community is thinking of all the communities in your environment, all the clubs perhaps, or if you belong to a church or a book club, is really trying to define not what you do, but what brings people together. Like, I'm a triathlete, that's why I'm in my outfit gear. I'm going to go for a run, and I'm a member of a triathlon club. And what is the essence? What is the purpose? For some people, it might be they want to get fit. For some people, they might want to be competitive. They want to get in shape after having kids, whatever that is. But they have this common purpose of they love sports and they want to be part of that community and that have that thing in common. And that's really what I trying to distill in the lemon tree mindset, is trying to attract the right crew. And it's people who might be doing very different things. It might be writing books, like I said before. It might be growing your community. You might be launching a podcast. But the common denominator is that you want to turn your passion into your lifestyle. And so that's purpose for me. And that's the purpose that I want to create inside my community.
I love that. I'm curious about your take. So I've wrestled with this whole idea of where purpose comes from for a long time, and like a lot of folks, I was very enamored of Simon Sinek's message. Start with why, and this idea, and Simon says that purpose is something that's inside you. It's fully formed by the time you're in your early 20s, and you need to find it, and then you can exploit it out in the world. And what I found for myself was that um, my my sense of purpose has changed many times over I was a student, I was an athlete, then I was a school teacher for a short time. I became a musician. That was something that gave me a lot of meaning and significance in my life. Became a husband and a father, and now I'm doing this other thing. And so purpose has been an evolving and emerging thing, and it's taken on a lot of different forms. But functionally, I've always been doing something that is related to making a difference, helping, doing work that matters with and for people I care about, helping other people get clear about and closer to what they want. And that idea that, you know, either purpose is something in you that you have to excavate or something that's out there that you have to go on some sort of spiritual journey to find can be really daunting to folks. But what I'm hearing and what you're saying is purpose can come from just waking up in the morning and doing the work that's right in front of you with as much purpose and passion as you can bring to it. And by bringing purpose and passion to the things that you're doing, more purpose emerges, more purpose is cultivated, and you can do things more and more purposefully and get clear about the things that are going to light you up.
Absolutely. And I think it's a mix, it's a combination of both, right? Like, not to get too philosophical, but if you think about purpose, it very often drives you back to your values. And as you said, what matters to you. And humans, we are not robots. We're not programmed with I have 7 values and this is what it is. We are always evolving. And I think a great example, you talked about parenthood. For me, when I became a mom, my values, my core values really evolved, because all of a sudden I had this huge responsibility of these 2 little people that I have to raise. And so all of a sudden purpose took a different meaning. So your values are there, but purpose can be evolving. And I think that's the beautiful thing, that you're always like uncovering things that matter to you, and you can use those to create new products, to create new communities, to send a new story. In my case, for example, when I was feeling very lost in Australia, and I had all these moments and this free time to ask myself a lot of questions, one of the questions that actually triggered my transformation was, what is the story I want to tell my daughters when they grow up? And I've talked a lot about this question, but I remember exactly the day I was walking on the beach with my two girls. We were on the sand. It was a winter in Australia. And I remember that up to that point, because I couldn't find a job, I was having a bit of a victim's mindset, which we often have when things don't go our way. People don't see my value here. These Australians don't value international experience. And I love Australians. My husband is Australian, but that was my situation. So I was creating all these army of excuses to justify what I didn't have and what I was not achieving. And that simple question, what is the story I want to tell my daughters when they grow up? It was such an eye opener because sometimes we're so focused trying to find answers that we don't really stop to ask the right questions. And that was a thought provoking question for me because it unlocked a lot of other things like, do I want to tell them, oh, I didn't do anything because no one wanted to hire me? Or do I want to tell them another story that maybe that's when your mom started writing? And that's when I started to create a new path. And that's when I started to make a bunch of mistakes because I was exploring something new. So yes, I think there's a lot of introspection that we need to do to really understand our values, what matters to us. Are we in line and are our actions in line with our values? Because it's very easy to say, my value is generosity, but what are we doing, for example, to materialize that into something? So it's that work of introspection, but it's also this auditing and this self-assessment of, and how am I embodying? How do I show up every day if I'm talking about these values?
I love that. Well, I really appreciate the highlighting of values because I think it's something that we don't talk about enough and we don't actually value enough is the way that I'm showing up in the world expressing what my core beliefs are, what my guiding principles are. Am I becoming the kind of person I want to become, or am I settling, or maybe even compromising those values just in order to fit in or to make a paycheck and so forth? And I love the idea. We use a Venn diagram with our community where you try to define what your core values and guiding principles are, and then you define what your core skills and talents are, and then you look for communities where people share your values and need your talents to enhance their lives. And at the intersection of those three things is probably where purpose lives. And if you can get that just that specific enough, then you can start bringing that purposefulness and that passion to what you do. And what we find is in most cases, purpose emerges. And so I love that part of it, of what you were saying. I'm also, um, I love what you said about what's the story I want to tell my daughters, because I believe that we are always making sense of ourselves, our world, and each other through narrative. I'm telling myself a story about myself. Sometimes that's a very positive story. Sometimes I'm beating myself up. I'm also wondering about the story that Veronica is telling about me and the people that are tuning in. And then there's a story about the situation that I'm in. And so what you one of the things I wrote about in one of my books was choose your story, choose your future. And by choosing that story of what do I like, I'm going to choose the story I tell my daughters about what happened to me in this moment. And that seems to have really redefined and redirected the course of your life.
Absolutely. And I would love to give credit, but I don't remember who said this. I know that it really touched me, and I use this phrase a lot, which is life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And it just reflects what you just shared to perfection because it's really the story that you're going to tell on the fact. The fact is objective, it's just a fact. It's up to you how you're going to tell that story, how you're going to narrate it. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah. Well, and as someone that is also an author, I mean, we are the authors of our lives. Sometimes people talk about life as a play and we're all players from the Shakespeare, and some people think of their life as a movie they're the star in. But, it's a pick your own adventure. You get to decide in every moment what the next possibility is. And that's another theme I really see in your story and in the work that I see on Substack is you are someone that really seems to be an optimist and what I would call a possibilitist. Like you see that there are bigger visions, better visions, more choices, ways that people could step into their potential and their possibility, whether it's through speaking or through writing or community building, all the things that you help with. What do you find to be the primary obstacles that or the bottlenecks in people that you work with who aspire to be and do more and better in some sort of creative endeavor or some sort of solopreneur entrepreneurial endeavor, but holds them back or keeps them blocked or prevents them from stepping into their potential? What are the big ones that you see?
There's so many. So the first thing is people start things and give up very quickly. That's one thing that I've observed. I've observed it in sports. I've observed it in writing. I've been in many different platforms, and you see so many people quit. And there's this other saying that I think is wonderful that basically says that people underestimate what they can achieve in 1 year and they overestimate what they can achieve in 1 week. And I think that is something that I see a lot. People coming to Substack, for example, since we're hosting this session here, and they think that in 3 months they're going to have thousands of subscribers, and that doesn't happen. And so they give up and they move to the next thing. And having this mindset of the building blocks and that every step, no matter even the missteps, they really add to the journey is something that I see a lot of people dismiss. And if they don't have the overnight success stories, because it is glorified and we see a lot of it out there, all these promises, I call them the Ferraris without an engine. And really focusing on what you're doing today. Yesterday, I did a live session, and at the end, I just told the audience, think about your goal. And by the end of the day, make sure that you have one thing, one little thing that gets you closer to it. And perhaps it's reaching out to someone, maybe sending a book submission. It might be do your live session, whatever that is. But those little steps, I think a lot of people underestimate them. So that's number one. And as a triathlete, I really put a lot of emphasis on that. When I think of, I've done an Ironman before, it's huge. And if you think about the whole thing, it looks so unachievable. But when you start to break it into small pieces, then you're able to have the mini wins. And I think this idea of micro wins is really important. You talked about positivity. I really focus on celebrating the small wins, even when you don't think that there's a win. There's always something in there. And then the second thing is that we spend so much time thinking about what other people think. How are they going to see me? How do I come across? Is this life perfect? Is my voice okay? So we think so much about what other people think about ourselves that we end up not doing things because of other people potentially think. So we're already thinking about the worst case scenario. And so we stay in our box and we try to make things perfect and we try to make sure that everything is just 100% perfect. And this idea of perfectionism, I think, is something that holds many people back. And I think normalizing failure, normalizing that you're going to fall and you're going to get up again is something that is really healthy. And if I may, I would like to share a story so that what we're talking about is not just abstract, but to really land it. And I don't know if you read it, Scott, but last week I wrote a post about my book launch. So this book,
Mhm.
I with Penguin, and I did a book launch in Singapore, and it was a flop. As in, there, there were not even book copies for some logistic issues. I went to Singapore. I was super excited. I thought it was going to be an incredible book festival. I barely had any people in the session. Didn't have book copies, so I don't even have a picture to show you signing a book copy because I didn't have any. It was so disappointing, and I left that session like really feeling disheartened. And then I said, look, girl, you go and pick up the pieces because this is a journey. And whatever happened in Singapore, you're going to move on from that. And I had two choices there. I could just keep that story to myself and pretend that my book is an amazing success and it's going so well everywhere. Or I could actually be open and share my story and say, look, this is what happened. And I always talk about transparency and honesty as a value. So back to how do you show up? If that is one of my values, I have to stick to my values and share the story, be honest, be transparent. And I share exactly what happened. You can find it there. It's called My Book Launch Was a Beautiful Flop because it was a beautiful flop, because there's beauty in falling, because you're going to stand up again and there's a lesson. And so I turned it around and I said, I'm going to show up here and I'm going to tell people what happened and that it was a flop. And it was such an empowering experience. And the most wonderful thing is that that post actually started to go a bit viral because people are not used to reading stories of flops and failures, because we just keep them to ourselves. We think that they're going to make us weak or they're going to make us too vulnerable, when in reality, so many people relate to that. So many people relate to sending a post that no one reads, or opening a chat and no one participates, or publishing a book and no one reads it. And so, yes, I think it's really important to share your story and not let all these things hold you back. Like, the things that hold us back are looking at you in the mirror. Is really here. It's not other people. It's not the recruiter who didn't hire you. It's not the readers who didn't come. Everything is in your mind. And when we're able to unlock that, you actually take things less seriously in a way, and you're able to enjoy yourself more. And if you do a book launch and it's a flop, it doesn't matter. You'll keep moving forward.
I love that. I did read that post, and it was very well done, but it also was really endearing and very inspiring. Just the way that you persevered through that, and I we have we talked a little bit earlier about this whole idea of you're becoming lies and being more of what you've always been. You had all these childhood experiences that really informed and inspired the person that you became after you exited corporate life. One of the things that we often talk about is system thinking and system reliability, and we have this quote that we borrowed from Nick Peterson: "The process is the shortcut." And the idea is that every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. And so the more unnecessary components you have in that system, the worse it's going to perform. The more complicated it is, especially if it's unnecessary, complicated, the worse the results are going to be. But when it comes to optimizing a system, if you can distill it down to the 2 or 3 things that need to go right to help you accomplish what you want to accomplish, the the least efficient and least effective component of that system is the human being that's pulling the levers and pushing the buttons, which is exactly what you were just talking about. And so when it comes to that idea of being able to reframe the story that you're telling yourself about things that don't work out the way they are, what are some of the what are some of the other ways that you think you would be helpful for people to hear? Like, how can we get more comfortable with what you said, normalizing failure or normalizing not accomplishing the thing that we want to accomplish? How do we how do we build that anti-fragility and that resilience that allows us to continue to show up and do our thing, knowing that things might not work out the way we want them to, but that there's still going to be benefit, we're still making progress, and we're still micro stepping into the right direction? How can we reframe that narrative?
So, as I said before, Scott, I'm a very visual person, and I know that many people are as well. So I always like to illustrate what I talk about with specific examples. And so, because I talked about the book Flop in Singapore, I like to go back to that. In the moment, right, I'm in my room and I'm expecting a lot of people, and it's an empty room and I don't have books, and it really, really feels like a disappointment. So I leave feeling really, really small, really diminished. And that's the story in that moment. What I find extremely helpful, and this is very practical and it works every single time, is to zoom out. And that's exactly what I did. As I was on my way to the airport, I called my husband and I was so disappointed. And we did this exercise of zoom out, and he actually helped me. And he said, "Okay, so you did this book launch in Singapore. It was a flop. Who published your book?" And I said, "Penguin Random House." And he said, "Oh, the biggest publisher in the world, right?" "Yeah." "How long did it take you to get that book published?" And I said, 2 years, and actually 3 books. I published 3 books before getting that book published, and I sent it to over 30 book publishers. And it was such a healthy exercise because he was like, "Okay, let's go on." And so you launched this book, and where else have you been talking about this book? And I had been to Hong Kong speaking at the literary festival. Earlier this year, I went to India to speak in a book festival in Kerala. I had 2 sessions. I sold out the books. It was my second time going to India. The first one was as a backpacker. So it was personally a beautiful experience. And I have sold hundreds of these copies. It's actually doing really well overall, so much so that I've been invited by Penguin India to go back in January to speak at the World Book Fair in Delhi. And when I did this exercise, I was like, wow, you're being so harsh on yourself because one thing didn't work. And you're dismissing all the other work that you've done, all the effort that you've put, all the micro wins that you've collected throughout almost a year. And now, because one thing doesn't work, you reduce your existence to this negative effect, to this negative fact. And this exercise is so helpful because very often, and now we can extrapolate this to anything, you might be saying, oh, I wrote a post and it was a complete failure. Or I did a live session. As I was saying yesterday, I did a live session with one of my founding members, Jeff Ross. I don't know if you'll see this. And it was his first LinkedIn live session. I had done many before. And he was disappointed because we only had 10 people joining the moment. So we were doing a debrief afterwards. And I said, Jeff, this is amazing. This is your first LinkedIn live session. If we hadn't done this, you would have zero. So the fact that we already had 10 people and it's going to be there and you're going to be better. And this was an experience. Zoom out and look at not only today in this specific moment, but all the journey and everything that you've been collecting, all these micro wins throughout the way. And so I'm just going to leave with this one tip, honestly, because I just think that it's so powerful and it works so well. Zoom out and look at the big picture.
I love that. Yeah, I love the reframe that you had so many little micro wins leading up to the publishing of, and through the publishing of the book. And then one thing doesn't work out, and we can hyper focus on that. I love the idea too of the zooming out. I often say that I'm constantly trying to balance um, my my deep sense of personal significance with my belief in my absolute insignificance from a cosmological point of view, and that these things are both true at the same time, and I have to kind of hold them equally. But the other thing that I'm hearing in what you're saying is there's always opportunity to learn and to grow and to become more courageous, more clear, more grateful, and all these things. Like sometimes there are situations where the only things to learn are patience, acceptance, humility, and resilience, and those are important things too. We learn and grow so much more from those failures than we do if it's just a grease slide and everything is always coming up roses and turning out perfectly. But there's this other thing that you talked about that I see quite often too, which is people are so deeply concerned with how they're measuring up to other people they see, or to this, to other people's scrutiny and expectations. And it can really keep us frozen, humble, hiding, stuck, and not stepping into our potential. So for folks that, and social media, especially legacy social media, but it happens here on Substack too. You know, my screenshots don't look like those screenshots, and I don't have a bestseller badge, and all these things, these kind of signifiers that are out there. How do you help folks uh, navigate those narratives? Because I think in some ways we're hardwired for that, right? We are inherently social creatures, and we're always playing status games. Where do I stand? How do I measure up? Where do I stand and what's expected of me in whatever the situation is? How do we break free of those status stories and those status anxiety stories that are keeping us from actually showing up, and just continue to hone our craft and to become better at the difference that we wanna make.
Hmm. It's such a good point. And I saw that Brandon was just saying that comparisons are really difficult to avoid. And they are. And it's true that comparison is a thief of joy. But the reality is that there's always going to be someone who is better, who is richer, who is more intelligent, more popular. One of the good things about doing sports, and yourself, Scott, you're also an athlete, is that when you're running, there are always people who are going to pass you. There are always people who are going to be faster. And so sports teaches you a lot of that, and how it's really about competing against yourself and normalizing that there are people who are going to be ahead, and that's normal. And I do find that this idea of competing against yourself, even it sounds like a cliche, it's very, very helpful when you look back where you were 6 months ago or a year ago. And that's really your benchmark. That's really your reference. So that's point number one. Like, compare against the right parameters, let's say, because otherwise you're going to be comparing just screenshots, as you said. But we're people, we have different backgrounds. How am I going to compare myself to someone who started writing when they were 20? I started when I was in my 40s. So we can't really compare different situations. Also, I think to what Brandon was saying, it's okay to be jealous. It's okay to normalize it. It's in human nature to say, hey, someone is here. I want that too. But the interesting thing is how we can turn that jealousy into something positive and try to see, okay, if Brandon is there or if Scott is there, what can I learn from them? Or what are they doing that is right? What I do very often when I see that someone is very successful, I actually even reach out. I try to collaborate. Here on Substack, I partner with so many people that are so much more successful than me. And it's a great way to push myself up and to lift myself. I always talk about this concept of social gravity, and this
Mhm.
idea of surrounding yourself with people who share that identity. For example, as an author, my work really started to step up when I took the initiative of approaching authors. I started going to literary festivals first as a participant, as a guest, I mean. Then I went as a moderator, and eventually now I'm going on a frequent, regular basis to different festivals. I'm publishing multiple books. Same with even sports. If you want to be a sports person, surround yourself with people who are there and who are going to lift you up. And that's what I mean by turning jealousy into something positive. It's like, hey, how can I step up? If they can do it, why can't I do it? And really use that gap to see how you can be better, do more, learn new things. So I do find that, yes, comparison starts at jealousy, but it can very easily turn into inspiration.
I love that. I think one of the things that I'm really hearing in what you're saying is you have to decide what game you want to play. I mean, it's called the game of life, and I think games are supposed to be fun, so maybe we could have a little bit more fun. But the other thing is you can't win your game if you're playing someone else's or playing by someone else's rules. And so, yes, there are other people, and maybe people are running the same race or in a similar race, and it's hard to look over to see, oh, that person's ahead of me or whatever it is. But what I have found is that the more I just try to stay in my like define the lane that I want to be in, like what am I trying to accomplish? Who am I trying to become? And one of the other things that you were talking about, I think, is the biggest force multiplier to anyone's success is who are you spending time with? You know, who are your mentors? Who are your teammates? Who are your coaches? And who are the people that you bring to cheer you on? Because when I say relationships are the biggest force multiplier in your life, it's like it works in both directions. If you surround yourself with more of the right people, you will make progress with greater ease and velocity. If you surround yourself with too many of the wrong people, they will hold you back and drag you down and keep you stuck in somewhere you don't want to be. And so, as we're kind of wrapping up, this whole idea of relationships reminds me of what you were saying earlier about the value of empathy, and relationships are important to both of us as both community builders, but also people that coach and write and teach. When you think about the way that empathy informs and inspires the way that you engage as a community builder, as a speaker, as an author, as a teacher, how what does empathy actually mean to you, and how do you leverage that as a force multiplier in making the changes that you want to make with the people that you're engaging with?
Mm. And it's interesting because empathy is a word that gets thrown out there. Have more empathy. And I'm like, but what am I supposed to do? How do I have more empathy? And so I find that it's very useful to put yourself in the shoes of the person that you're trying to have resonance with. What that looks like, and not many people do this exercise, is let's talk about your community, for example, your publication, is really try to understand what are the challenges of the readers, of the people that you are trying to bring to your community, and really articulate those. Like, I know that people in my community is authors who are brilliant, but they hate selling. And so they're not selling books, or it's people who want to leave the corporate job. They feel that they're really stuck, like I was, and they don't really know how to transition and do something more creative. Or it might be introverts like myself who would like to start speaking on live sessions or doing public speaking, but there's something holding them back. And when you really do this exercise of understanding the other people, what are their challenges, what they're trying to achieve, that really gives you a different perspective, because empathy is about perspective. It's about living where you are to put yourself in the shoes of someone else and look at the same situation from a different perspective. It also helps a lot to put yourself in the shoes of who you were a year ago, 2 years ago, because we are very good at dismissing the things that we've achieved. Oh, yeah, but that's easy. That's a no brainer, self published book, or things like these. And having that empathy also to understand what it is like for someone who is at the stage where you were 2 years ago. So these things can be very helpful. And now, going a little bit deeper into empathy, I actually have a session for corporates where I talk more in depth about empathy. And I really love how you can break it down into different pieces. And the first thing is the cognitive empathy, which is I understand you, right? That's the cognitive element. I understand what you're telling me. I understand your situation. The second one is the emotional empathy. I feel you. Is not only understand you, but I feel you. And so we have an emotional resonance. And the third one, and this is where it gets really interesting, is the compassionate empathy. I understand you. I feel you. I want to help you. And that's why I have this community. And when you really have like these three elements of empathy, that's really where things click. So I really love these layers of empathy.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of leveraging the power of empathy, and I totally agree. The capacity to see, feel, and understand someone else's lived situation as a means of moving into the even more beneficial and heroic act of, and I want to help. I think these things are also can become really, really fraught. Like you talked about, the felt empathy can really suck you in to a situation where you can actually be feeding someone's doom spiral by feeling the feels together and not moving into that compassionate act of, okay, yes, we feel this now, we must feel this, we must, and now we also must move beyond that. I think distinguishing the empathetic moment from the compassionate moment is really super helpful. But my final question for you, because so when I first worked with Seth Godin in the marketing seminar, one of Seth's superpowers is empathy. He is one of the most empathetic people I know, and his whole vision and program for marketing is built on empathy. And when I first went into that program, I like had to admit to myself, I don't really get what this empathy thing is. And I would ask all of my friends in the cohort to explain it to me. And when they explained it, I still didn't understand it. And I didn't think that they actually understood it either, because it is a really fraught, difficult term. And so I spent a lot of time writing about this, talking about this, and have come to the same conclusions that you have. And what I find is that when I am working with people in my community, with my clients, with my friends and family, they are we all fancy ourselves to be incredible practitioners of empathy. We have we are generous, we are purpose driven, we are thoughtful, we are kind, and we have the capacity to see, hear, feel, and understand someone else's lived experience without judgment, without shaming, guilting, advising. But if we listen to the narrative in our own heads much of the time, there doesn't seem to be a lot of empathy in the conversations that are going on inside these folks' head. There's lots of guilt, shame, fear, anxiety, imposter syndrome, all these sort of things. So, as a way of wrapping this up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, like, if empathy is this thing that we're getting better and better at expressing with others in our work, in our communities, how do we start to do that work from the inside out so that we treat ourselves with the same empathy, dignity, compassion, generosity that we treat other people?
Mm, That's such a great point because we're often thinking, as you said, about how to have more empathy with others, and very often it has to start from ourselves. And so, a really important exercise is to recognize the work that you're doing. And I think so often we're so harsh on yourselves, on ourselves, on the things that don't go well, on the things that we missed, and I just find that being able to look in the mirror and being fair to yourself and try to find the little wins every day and try to have empathy with that person who showed up. The other day, let me talk about empathy with oneself. Again, with an example, one of my founding members called Katja, she's German, and she was sharing this story of how I had encouraged her and motivated to do her first webinar. And she said that no one showed up. It was just her. And what she did next to me is a beautiful example of what that empathy means. She said that she actually stayed, she delivered the entire webinar, she recorded the session with a smile, and then she shared it with her community. And this is what I mean by having empathy with yourself. Instead of shutting down the computer and saying, this was a flop, is like you show up. And I think showing up is already having empathy with yourself, regardless of who is going to be in the room. Because if you keep showing up again and again, eventually the room will fill up. And so have empathy with yourself because if today you're talking to two people and you keep showing up, one day the room will be full for sure. And so when you're writing, when you're speaking, today we're speaking to 44 people. I'm speaking as if we were talking to 1,000. It doesn't matter how many people are here. Give yourself that grace, give yourself that empathy because you're going to be your best supporter. You're going to be your best ambassador. I have a chapter actually on being your best ambassador. And I think that's what empathy means is saying, hey, be on your own side. We are so often our detractors. So what if you started to show up? What if you became your best supporter? What if you start championing yourself, even if the room is empty? So that's it for me on empathy.
Yeah, I love that. As a musician, especially in the early days, I was very familiar with the sound of one fan clapping, and it was sometimes a little depressing. But there was a moment in my career where I just decided, you know what? If one person shows up, they get the same show that I give when 100 people show up. And over time, the venues grew, the audiences grew, and I really attribute it to that moment where this person gets the best that I have to offer right now. And I love that idea of being your own in your own corner that you just talked about. I call it conspiring with your future self. Get together with a person that you want to become, and that person will help you become the thing by doing the thing. So I really love that closing advice. Veronica, I know I'm keeping you from your run, and I know you're eager to get out there and start slapping the pavement, but is there anything that we didn't cover that you were hoping to cover? Do you have any final words of wisdom for the folks that have tuned in? It's been an absolute privilege and pleasure to be talking to you today. Your
I think
tomorrow. My tomorrow, your today.
we covered absolutely everything. Just a reminder that for me is all about planting the little seeds. When I talk about the lemon tree mindset, is really about this idea that life is not if, is when it throws you lemon, you're going to have a choice. And I think that really symbolizes everything that we've talked about today, how it's really your choice to make lemonade or plant your lemon tree or your lemon grove or whatever you want to do. But it was absolutely my pleasure, Scott. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I hope the 45 people who are with us right now are as well. So thank you so much from Hong Kong.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for everyone that tuned in, we really appreciate the gift of your time and attention. Veronica, really inspired by all the insights that you're sharing out in the world and just loving following your journey and being a witness. And for everyone, wherever you are, be well, do good, have fun, and hope to see you soon. Veronica, take care.